will do. Thank you, Alex. Well, hello, everybody, and I'm so happy to see so many of you here today. A warm welcome to all of you, and completely overwhelmed. Well, then, welcome to our masterclass, Implementing Event Management Successfully. Today, you will hear from our experts, Alex and Hannes, and I will be your moderator for today. My name is Nermina, and I'm a senior IT operations and content specialist at Einar Partners. Maybe just before we start, we should maybe just take care of a couple of things right in the beginning here regarding the recording of the webinar. Yes, it will be recorded and it will be available on the YouTube channel of Einar Partners. The second thing is also that the topic of today's webinar is also a white paper that will be delivered to you via email by Monday, also containing the link for the YouTube video. The third thing to mention is that you can see there's a Q&A function available here and through the entirety of the webinar. And this session, you can ask questions and we shall try to address them at the very end of the session here. If there's maybe no more time to address your questions, our experts will contact you on one-on-one session to clarify those things. Yeah, that could be all. On the very last slide of this presentation, you will see a QR code that you can scan, and you will get the emails of our panelists for today. Now over to you guys. Alex, please.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nermina. So I'll go ahead first here. Just like Nermina explained, I am super excited to see so many people today. And like we said in the beginning, Hannes, I think we're breaking a record here. So over 700 people have signed up for today's masterclass. And yeah, that just makes me so happy to see.
Nice.
Yeah, super cool. But with that being said, we only have 1 hour here. And what we're going to discuss is indeed about event management. So very, very fun topic. It's something which I am very passionate about. And my name is Alexander Ljungström. I'm currently working as the managing director at Einar Partners. And just some very brief background about me. I have worked with event management since the absolute first release in ServiceNow. So that was in the Fuji release, if I'm not mistaken. So quite a long time now, like almost 6-7 years. I used previously to work at ServiceNow in their ITOM team, but these days I am leading then the company Einar Partners. And what we are doing, we are focusing only on ServiceNow ITOM and the strategy around that. So obviously I'm very passionate about this, but I'm also very happy that I'm not only alone here today, but that I have my good colleague and friend Hannes with me. So Hannes, who are you?
Hi guys, so yeah, I'm Hannes Hirvikallio. I come from the Cloud People company. I'm based in my basement today in Helsinki. Normally I travel around a bit more to see customers, but yeah, I'm one of the founders and managing partner here at the Cloud People, and we focus on kind of getting the value of the ServiceNow platform, whether it be in event management or other topics, to our customers. So we implement, we support, we can resell, etc., etc. We've been in the ServiceNow business quite some time, and of course in event management as well. I think our first customers in ServiceNow came at 2009 when ServiceNow was just basically starting. So that's a long time ago. Now I feel old. And in event management space in particular, we've done event management or built event management solutions on top of ServiceNow platform even before the event management solutions existed. So a long-standing experience with event management as a topic and also ServiceNow as the platform. And yeah, we're a company from Northern Europe, currently 200 people, and growing very rapidly. And I'm really happy to be here today, Alex, with you, and looking at a record crowd. So let's do this.
Let's do this, indeed. Super cool, guys. All right, so there is a large audience here today, and some of you in the audience, you will have, different level of experience when it comes to event management. So we'll try to put the balance somewhere in the middle. For those of you who are absolute beginners, then this will be useful to learn about the capabilities of event management, what it actually can do for you. Then for those of you who maybe are a consultant, maybe you're working as a project manager, product owner, solution architect, etc., you're probably sitting here today curious about how can we realistically implement event management? What are some tips and tricks we should think about when we scale event management? So I will speak a little bit around that. And then obviously you, Hannes, here, with your experience, especially around the business related areas, building business cases, etc., you will give some guidance there. And I believe you also have a real life case with you with some KPIs that we're going to present in the end. So
exactly, yes.
Excellent. And just like Nermina said in the beginning, should there be any questions meanwhile, use the Q&A function. I just want to clarify one thing before we get started. So who will the masterclass target? I mentioned a few roles here. But when we speak about event management, we can essentially categorize it in two ways. And today, primarily, we are referring to the more, let's say, traditional monitoring setups. And what I mean with that is if you are a company who are using Nagios, SCOM, Zabbix, Azure Alerting, SAP systems, etc., the more kind of traditional monitoring, then this is a good masterclass for you. Often it could be that maybe you have a network operator, NOC network operation center. Maybe you're an MSP, so you have a lot of customers and you're doing a lot of monitoring. Or maybe you're just a traditional enterprise with a lot of different monitoring teams. The webinar today is not about if you're sitting here wondering about DevOps, observability, site reliability engineering, application performance monitoring, etc. We've actually covered this topic also together with the cloud people before, and there are recordings available for that. So with that being said, for those of you who genuinely are interested in the real life implementation journey, then this is the masterclass for you, as well as the business sides and the return on investment aspects. So I just want to set these expectations right now, so some of you who maybe were on the right side here don't get too disappointed. Also, I'd like to clarify what we will not cover, because there are already a lot of videos about how you configure event management and the technical aspects. And of course, we will touch upon some of them, but I will not go into the nitty-gritty details today about best practice around configuring event rules, for example, but that is a separate discussion. And I will also not speak about the rest of the ITOM health parts so much, so namely health log analytics and metric intelligence. And additionally, I also assume here that the audience at least know the very core basic concepts of event management, because that way then, we can simply generate more value here today, I think. So with that being said, let's jump in here and start a little bit speaking around the capabilities of event management. Because just like I explained before, we're not gonna cover like the most basic technical details today about how you configure event management. And the reason for this is when we are implementing event management, there is often a bigger picture in mind that is neglected. So I will speak more about that later. But first, for those of you who are a little bit new to the topic, or maybe for those of you who just want to brush up your knowledge, let's look at the capabilities and what can one expect from the product. So as I mentioned before, then me personally, I love event management. Like, it's one of the greatest products in the ITOM suite, in my opinion at least, because it's quite straightforward. It really gives good ROI, and it's very, very tangible. If you compare to like Discovery maybe, or a CMDB, that's typically something which not always give an immediate value which you can measure. But event management is very tangible when it comes to ROI and KPIs and measuring things. And that is one of the reasons I like it so much. And here's the thing with event management, that like Hannes said in the beginning, the cloud people have worked with it since 2009. I have worked with it a long time as well. So event management has been around for quite a long time. And what I like about the product is that we now start seeing the products basically on steroids when it comes to the innovation of it. So to the very left side here, that's where we started like around 7 years ago. Then in the beginning, event management, it was mostly meant for kind of being the manager of managers, where you really consolidate all the monitoring tools and you get this single pane of glass type of thing. And you also had things like groupings and correlations. And this was in the beginning in the already Fuji release, Helsinki release, and so forth. Then around 5 years ago, we started seeing something interesting, which was more around the metrics and the machine learning parts. So that's when we really started being able to do more predictive monitoring and doing predictions and looking into the future. So anomaly detection, metric base, etc. But only now, the past 2 years, we have seen huge innovations in event management, or in the ITOM health suite in general. So for example, we can now connect logs, we can connect analytics to it. And now as of lately, I think only 2-3 releases old now, we actually have the capacity to not only consolidate event tools or event sources, but we can actually use event management as a standalone monitoring tool itself. And Hannes, I believe you have some practical examples of this later from a customer, but this for me makes it a very, very fun product to work with, looking at just how rapid it is developing.
Yeah, very true. So I'll touch upon that subject later on with one customer example. I wouldn't like to say that it came as a surprise, but it was a positive effect that the new agent-based stuff from ServiceNow actually is pretty mature. So we'll touch upon that later at this presentation.
Yeah, exactly. So Hannes, speaking of this agent and so forth, maybe you could high level go through of some of the business drivers. So what are the typical reasons why people choose to start with event management? What have you heard based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in all of what we do in IT, a business case or a calculation of benefits is something that drives the investments. So we need to have at least a clear vision of kind of what do we want to achieve when going into any particular initiative. And today's question around ITOM health or event management, for that question, it needs to have a calculated business case. And it can be from a strategic perspective. You know, ServiceNow talks a lot about their 3-0 strategy, which basically means 0 physical footprint, 0 outages, 0 incidents. The business drivers can be on a strategic level, or then coming down to a more tactical or operational level, reducing mean time to repair or improving root cause analysis. So it depends very much on kind of where the customer is and what the day-to-day situation is. So do we need, or do we have a lot of outages? Do we need to reduce that amount of outages, or do we want to save time when improving the restoration of services? So it is a case by case, but we're here to help. We've seen a lot of these initiatives starting and of course finishing as well. So we're here to help calculating basically on the KPIs, calculating on the business drivers, and helping you voice your aspirations internally in organizations as well when it comes to calculating a business case. But kind of what I want to state here and highlight is that the situation is always different. There are some strategic level drivers, and we're here to help you pick out the best ones that fit your organization.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So if I understand you correctly, Hannes, then basically there are multiple layers, like strategic ones, tactical ones, operational ones, where there are all different business drivers. And I think we will touch upon those a little bit more later, if I'm not mistaken.
True, very true.
Yeah. Okay, super cool. So these are obviously some of the business drivers. But what I like to do now is, because of course, especially maybe for some of you on the call here today, you might have worked with event management for a long time, or you have read a lot about it, and it's not the first time you hear about these concepts of noise reduction, what I mentioned before, single pane of glass. So these are all familiarized concepts for a lot of people, and you can find it on the documentation website, you can find it on the website of ServiceNow, etc. So I would like to now go in a little bit to the capabilities of event management, and I'm gonna focus on an area which I have seen is often not really highlighted as much as it should be. So for me, the true power, if we speak about the capabilities of event management, the true power lies in connecting data points. And this is especially true when it comes to in anything in IT operations, CMDB, the ServiceNow platform, and so forth. But I would like to break this down and show practical examples of how this actually looks when we are connecting data points with the help of event management. So this is a capability blueprint that we have of event management. And in the very bottom here, so that would be considered like the infrastructure layer, right? So that is where we have the monitoring tools situating. And in our infrastructure landscape, then we have typically a lot of different monitoring tools. There was a research done by, I believe, Forrester Group, and they identified that they asked a lot of enterprises, and I think that over 25% of enterprises were using 40 or more monitoring tools. So, it's quite a lot of monitoring tools if you're a sizable company. But then what we tend to do with event management is that we put out, maybe you already know this, but we put out these mid servers in the network or in the cloud or in the on-prem systems or whatever it might be. And these mid servers is typically where we send the events from the monitoring tools. And all of these mid servers, they can then receive monitoring data. It could be from different environments, it could be from different customers, or it could be from different monitoring sources like Nagios, SCOM, etc. Here we have ServiceNow. And when we speak about capabilities, I'm going now to split it up into, or slice it into 4 different sections. So I want people to be aware of these capabilities. And of course, there are many more than these, but this is the simplified version. So why should we use event management, essentially? The first thing is, when we have set up all of these different monitoring tools, they are typically segregated from each other. Individually, they are very, very good at what they're doing. So if you have SolarWinds or Cisco ISE or something like that, it's very good at monitoring network equipment. If you have SCOM, it's very good at monitoring the Windows servers, and so forth and so on. But the truth is that often there is a cause and effect in play. And this is what is difficult to see when monitoring tools are separated from each other. Because think about it, like if you have a core switch which dies, then there will for sure be a domino effect in other monitoring tools. And this is one of the main reasons why we are consolidating them to the ServiceNow platform. Because when we're connecting it all to the same event management platform, we can then really start grouping alerts from different monitoring tools together. And now you might be wondering, well, Alex, how does that actually work? How does that take place? Well, it takes place from three perspectives primarily. The first is, if you have a good CMDB, you can correlate different data points from different monitoring tools to the same type of infrastructure and configuration item. So a practical example, let's say you have a server, and on that server you have SQL instances. And maybe you have two different monitoring tools, one for the SQL instances and another one for the servers. Typically, these monitoring tools are separated, but because we have a CMDB here, the CMDB is kind of the link in the middle. Then we also have things like relationships in the CMDB, or relationships with service mapping, which also can be used to group things and correlate things. And finally, in the last release, in the San Diego release, we also have tag-based clustering, where you can actually look at text patterns from different monitoring tools, and based on that, you can group them together. So all of these factors combined can create really solid groups of alerts that are typically completely disconnected from each other and give a more accurate picture. And here comes the cool stuff. So when we speak about RCA or root cause analysis, so if you in ServiceNow also have changes, you have incidents, maybe you are also using logs and you are using discovery to find configuration files, maybe you are using the knowledge base. All of these things can then be connected to the event management parts. So when you get an alert, you could potentially see, okay, was it due to a change happening somewhere? And what was the domino effect there? Or was it due to an incident? Do we have a P1 open that was causing these alerts, and so forth and so on? So there's a lot of data which is being generated, and that's where the machine learning and analytics parts come into play from ServiceNow. So this is very out of the box. You don't need to tweak these things, but basically the machine learning elements, they are put as a wrapper around all of these aspects here. And then in the very top, when you do your analysis, when you are investigating, maybe you are working in a network operations center, or maybe you are in a help desk and you have an alert, you're using all of these different data points together. Then finally you decide to take action. So maybe you create an incident, or maybe you trigger a flow of some sort, which reboots a server or grabs a file or whatever it might be. But I just wanted to highlight these things because when we speak about capability, this is the bigger picture that I have seen people often fail to communicate to other monitoring teams. And this is where the true value lies when we speak about event management. All right, so I'm not going to go through this now, but if there are some people on the call who are now sitting and maybe the first time hearing about event management, you should just be aware about the high level concepts here, very, very simplified, that we have payloads coming in to the event management tool from different monitoring tools. Then we have an event created. Then based on that event, we might or might not create an alert. And based on the alert, we might or might not create an incident or take action or whatever it might be. So obviously, I'm not going to go through these things now because they're quite fundamental and basic, but if you're curious about them, then go ahead and read the documentation website. And the reason I was mentioning them is because I'm going to speak about some of these concepts now when we come to actually implementing event management. So as I mentioned before, I'm not sitting here today speaking about implementing event management of this is how you should configure it, or this is the settings that you should use for your mid servers or something like that. When we truly speak about succeeding with scaling event management, there are other factors that comes into play. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a story that I often see repeating itself. Keep in mind that we have worked with probably 20, 25 major enterprises and looked at event management. I've been speaking to so many people who are using event management. So what I'm telling here is like, it's very common thing. And what tends to happen in some cases is that event management is bought for whatever reason. Maybe you are in the process of buying ServiceNow ITOM and you get like a sweet license deal from ServiceNow and they say like, well, add event management for just a small increase in cost, you get all of these extra features. Or maybe you're like a product owner or platform owner with some budget and you buy event management. Okay, great. And what I often have seen is that there might exist a core team who is very enthusiastic about event management. Maybe the ServiceNow team, some people configuring it, it looks really cool. And on paper, it has all of these great features of machine learning, of grouping things together, all of these things that I just explained. But yet, the rate of adoption is low. And this is something that I often see repeating, that despite the fact that event management exists, we have all of these technical baselines, then people don't use it. And this is the situation that we'd like to avoid. And this is a situation that I often see repeating itself. And this is largely what I'm going to speak about now today. How do we avoid this? And how do we really scale event management? I'm not speaking scaling from a technical perspective, but scaling from a usage perspective, really embedding it into the DNA of an organization. So that is for me what it is about, and that is what often is difficult for people to do. And let's look at it, because I'm not making this up. This is some statistics, this is some research. So at Einar Partners, we have a research unit where we often try to benchmark things. We try to look at, how do the things work in real life. And we did a questionnaire. We went out to a number of customers and people who are using event management. And in the very top here, actually, only 6% of the people we asked, they claimed that the technical aspects of event management was the primary challenge. So only 6% said that the configuration was like where they struggled the most. And that for me is very interesting. So despite being like a rather technical area, obviously, it's a very, very small minority who find that being the primary challenge. For the people who were successful with event management, that actually succeeded with rolling it out, 8 out of 10 of those, they said that event management gave the quickest results compared to any other ITOM module that they had implemented. So if you succeed with event management, if you follow these tips and guidelines, the time to value can be quite fast actually. And this for me is pretty cool. And when we looked at the cases that had rather poor return on investment for whatever reason, it turned out that over 72% of those cases, it was simply due to a lack of buy-in. So that low adoption rate that I spoke about before. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when we are speaking about scaling event management and implementing event management, there are other factors to consider than simply doing a kick-ass technical baseline. And that's what I'm going to speak about a little bit right now. So of course, Hannes, you too, if you feel that you want to contribute with some of your experiences, feel free to jump in. But let's start with the baseline here. So when we start with event management, what I have seen is that it typically starts from one of two viewpoints. The first one is mandated by policy. So basically there is a necessity to transform. And the other one is what I call the convincing game. That's where you actually need to create organizational buy-in. And depending on where you are in this spectrum here, the way you implement event management and the way you succeed with it will vary differently. So if there is a policy-driven mandate to transform, it often means that there has been like a centralized decision to use event management. For example, if you're an MSP, then okay, we are going to change out a tool, or we're really going to start with event management, and there is no questions asked about it. Everyone is going to do it. You don't need to convince people, it's a fact. And the same is if it comes from the IT leadership and it's mandated there that we have to transform. There is no other option. So it's not up for debate, basically. What we often here also see is that in these situations, it tends to be a rather big spread of like legacy monitoring tools that are disconnected. So, you know, SCOM, Zabbix, Nagios, these type of things. The political buy-in, it tends to exist already in a certain extent, at least. So you don't need to convince monitoring teams and whatnot, but everyone is on board from the beginning. And often event management might actually be the first true modernization in quite a while that the organization have done. So if you are on the left side here, then implementing event management goes rather fast. On the right side here, which is what I will speak a lot about today, this is what I call the convincing game. So often the reason we have event management then is because maybe a product owner with budget, they have bought event management, but there is still like a lot of work done to really embed it into the company. And if you look at the perspective from monitoring teams, what I have seen from personal experience is that yes, they agree the tools, they might be disconnected, but individually, the monitoring teams, they don't really consider themselves that they're struggling as such. They're pretty happy with their tools and like, well, why do I need this, you know? So this means that the buy-in, it really needs to be created, or it only exists in like isolated pockets here and there. And these type of, on the right side here, often we also see that modern monitoring tools tend to exist in one degree or another. So like Dynatrace, or maybe there is some tool for anomaly detection, etc. But I just want to mention here that this is a spectrum. It's not like one or the other. It can be quite a mixture here. But try to understand where you are on this spectrum, because depending on where, as I said, things will look differently when you embed event management. All right, so let's look at embedding event management then in an organization. Because truth is, people are most afraid of change when they are not part of it. So what I'm going to speak about now is how can you really convince monitoring teams to start using event management, and why should you do so? All right, so here are some tips. The first tip here is immediately from the start, speak the same language. So when you approach monitoring teams, there needs to be an absolute clarity about how do we define a metric, how do we define an event, and how do we define an alert, and how do we define an incident. The reason for this is because different monitoring tools call these things differently, or they define them differently. So if you're working in, let's say, Nagios, an alert might be known as a notification. And if you work in Zabbix, maybe when you're speaking about an event, you're actually referring to an alert, and so forth and so on. And actually, I have seen this create a huge amount of confusion when you approach different monitoring teams and you start speaking about events and alerts. So point being, really create good definitions of what do we mean when we speak about these different concepts. And another very important reason for this is because when we integrate with monitoring tools, then the question is, will we integrate the events from the monitoring tools, or will we integrate the already filtered events, aka the alerts, into ServiceNow event management? So have some clarity about the definitions when you approach the monitoring teams. Another thing which I often see being a mistake is that there is not really a super clear value defined. So Basically, when you approach monitoring teams, when you're gonna start onboarding different sources of event management, it should be crystal clear in which way does it help other people in the organization if they share their data with ServiceNow Event Management, I mean, and in which way could it help them if they share their data with ServiceNow Event Management. So really have well-defined use cases of how will the value be generated. And Hannes spoke about it before on a strategic, on a tactical level, on an operational level, but really draw up these use cases. Because I have often seen monitoring teams sitting and they're saying, well, I'm not really sure how this will help me, you know. No, maybe it won't, but with them sharing the data, it will help a lot of other people. Maybe in the help desk, maybe in the network operations center, whatever it might be. And that brings me to the next part here. Another classic mistake that I often have seen is that who will actually use event management? It feels like a pretty rudimentary question to ask, but knowing the target audience, the user personas of realistically, who will sit and look at the alerts, who will sit and look at these events coming into ServiceNow every day. There needs to be someone we're doing all of this for, and that should be crystal clear. And those are the people that we should create all the processes for as well. And last but not least, this will be a very big thing when you're going to scale event management. Thresholds and filterings. So when you approach different monitoring teams, when you have different sources, what assumptions can we make when it comes to the filtering and the thresholds? Can we assume that all the events that they are sending to ServiceNow, they should instantly become an alert, for example, because they are critical or they are high severity or something like that? So things like that. What assumptions can we make about the data that is being generated and sent to ServiceNow? Another important thing, where will the filtering take place? So where are the filtering being applied and where are the thresholds defined? In a lot of cases, it will be in the monitoring tools that you're integrating with, because they already have defined thresholds since before, and they don't want to recreate all the thresholds in ServiceNow, even though you could if you wanted to, of course. But this is important because I have seen a lot of monitoring teams create a huge amount of resistance and being quite protective about their tools. So essentially have a very clear consensus on where are the thresholds and where are the logic being placed. So the logic for creating incidents and groupings, etc., it will be in ServiceNow. But the basic thresholds and filterings and whatnot, it will be in the monitoring source. So that's just one example, but this is hugely important and something which I often see being neglected or not addressed enough. Okay, so rollout models. What have we seen here? There are two common rollout models. The first one is a source-based rollout model, all right? And this one is basically where you identify the different event sources that exist and you approach them one by one. So maybe you have 20 different event sources. Okay, then you take them one by one, you reach out to the individual stakeholders, you explain what event management is, how it can help them, how it can help the organization, etc. And then you start creating event rules. You actually connect the source, you set it into production, and you launch it. So in other words, you approach it source per source. The good thing with this is that it has a rather large impact because you're doing it on a source per source basis. The bad thing is it takes a lot of preparation, so be aware of that. Then we have this approach, what I call the wave-based approach. And this can happen either per site, or it can happen per customer, or maybe per network segment, or maybe per critical application, or whatever it might be. But in a wave-based approach, typically you take, for example, these are our most critical applications. You identify what objects are being monitored. And then you do a delta and see, okay, do we have all of these objects in our CMDB? Do we need to create tags, etc., etc.? And then you start allowing the incoming events. So this is a more gradual expansion, but this often assumes that you have the sources already connected and that you are slowly kind of allowing more and more data to flow in to ServiceNow based on customers, based on the sites, based on the critical applications or whatever it is. So it's a more iterative process with gradual expansion, basically. So stick to one of these two rollout models and it's rather successful. Approaching the end here, we have also the short and long-term vision, which is often being neglected a little bit, that people want to run very fast. So how can we plan for long-term development and embedding? This is a typical journey that I have seen being successful. So start with the core, all right? Stick to it with out of the box, groupings, correlations, etc. Then after that, we can look at remediation areas. So connecting into ITSM, change management, incident management, etc. But the purpose here is to have a baseline of people using it. And not only until that is done is when we really start optimizing things. So this is where we start creating like custom groupings and correlations. Maybe we start receiving events on levels of microservices and DevOps like Kubernetes, Docker, etc. And that's really the second stage where we start innovating for real. But the point is set up a baseline. And once that is done, then we can start looking at AI and logs and so forth. So some of the goals that could clearly be defined in a roadmap is things like noise reduction, maybe by a certain number. We should working on group level of alerts instead of individual alerts. Maybe we should do direct cost savings. Maybe we should optimize mean time to resolve and so forth and so on. So have that roadmap in mind. And then now finally, before I hand over to Hannes, what are some pillars for a successful rollout? So these are like some tips that I have seen. So use these tips and it can be more successful than you imagine. First, don't get stuck in custom groupings and correlations too early in the project. Go with the 80-20 approach, all right? Try to cover 80% of everything, and then you approach the final 20% later. Not everything will be perfect from day one, but a lot is good already. Which brings me to the next point, that out-of-the-box capacity for event management will probably cover like above 90% of all the needs when it comes to like groupings and correlations, etc. There is one exception here, which is for domain separation. Leverage pilot groups. This is hugely efficient. I have seen that you create pilot groups where you have a few enthusiastic individuals and you create champions from these pilot groups. And these people can help really spread event management in an organic fashion. A huge part of event management is about noise reduction. So know where to measure that noise reduction. Is the noise reduction in amount of alerts? Is the noise reduction in amount of incidents? Is it in the amount of critical incidents, etc., etc.? But really know where to pinpoint these things and start measuring that noise reduction so you know you're on the right track. Also, I always advocate challenge the constant need for bidirectional flows of data. I often see every monitoring team almost always saying, can we get this bidirectional? Yes, you maybe can in theory, but one of the primary purpose with event management is that we want event management to be the driver. So you don't always need bidirectional flows of events and alerts. At least be aware of that and challenge it sometimes. And finally, monitoring people and subject matter experts, they love their own tools. So they will not want to switch to event management always. And what I always do is I don't go into technical debates. one mistake I often see is people just telling about all of these cool features, but people are used to the way they are used to working. So rather focus on communicating the big picture that I explained before, and that typically make monitoring teams more willing to share their data and involve themselves in the process. So I've been talking a lot right now, but Hannes, based on that, tell us, what are some business drivers and business cases? And you also have a customer case with you, I believe.
So basically, we now heard around the concept of event management and where does it benefit you guys, the customers, the users, the business stakeholders. If we take a step back, so kind of if you're now interested in event management, what can we do to get you guys started? And these are some practical real life examples we've seen. What was the decision-making process? What did we kind of figure out as we went along in different customer implementations? So I think my first tip here is look inside. So if you've now kind of made a decision that event management from ServiceNow or ITOM Health for that matter looks very interesting, I think we should start looking at insights of what are the tools and the capabilities and the people and the processes we have around event management. So what do we have there? More often than not, when we start an event management program, we actually gradually start finding out that this tool also plays a part in event management. So we kind of get to not a surprising effect, but the tool landscape is not that black and white or clear cut from the day one, but it's more of a gradual learning curve. So look inside. That's our first tip, or my first tip. Then keep the goal clearly in mind. So event management will apply a habitual change. So I think the good implication, Alex mentioned it in his previous slides, but the concrete implication there is that the moving away from let's call it a server-based approach to a more service-based approach on monitoring or events, that is what is going to happen. So if you have that plan and the goals and the KPIs that we've discussed previously, if you have those in mind, just understand that there's going to be change, there's going to be innovation, and there's going to be adoption during this program. CMDB, in our view, or in my view, is integral. It is time to brush up the CMDB during an event management implementation. And of course, one good implication of it is moving from purely a CI-based or a server-based approach to more of a service-based approach. So it's not, there's a question in the chat as well. It's not a prerequisite, in my opinion, to starting an event management program, but be aware that CMDB is going to become an issue during the program or during the implementation of it. And that's one part of the innovation and kind of going forward after event management first phase is that CMDB is going to be looked upon, or it's going to be in the center of things. And then road mapping. ServiceNow has a lot of good capabilities or good functionality that can help around event management. And it's good to understand what that capability is. I think Alex mentioned it a couple of slides back, the new agent-based stuff from ServiceNow. So it's good to be aware of what is there and what's also coming so that we can plan an internal roadmap to be aligned with the ServiceNow's event management roadmap in general. So going forward, if you take the next slide, thanks, Alex.
There you go.
A few tips and tricks on how do we start to calculate the business case. So keeping in mind the lessons learned from the previous slide. So of course, the business case is around money, it's around effort, it's around what do we improve. So it very often starts looking internally. So looking at the current monitoring tool landscape, identifying the capabilities of these tools, provide different element managers that you might find, different provisioning tools. There are several tools out there that do event management, do some monitoring capabilities, but also do some provisioning capabilities. So it's important to understand the landscape of it. So what are we talking about? What are we here to integrate? What are we here to replace? What are we here to improve? Then it goes down to the nitty-gritty, which you basically need to do with your finance department or your legal department with looking at agreements. So what is it costing us? So what are we currently spending on this space? It's not 100% accurate analysis all the time, but it's important to get the baseline or kind of get a good picture of the running costs so that we're able to create the baseline of it. And that involves, of course, software, maintenance costs, people, and time used, time worked. So it's not an exact science, but it's clear to kind of, or it's good to get a clear understanding of what the generic level of costs are. Then it's time to move on to more of a people perspective. So talk to the teams, talk to the different event management teams or monitoring teams or teams in general, that where is their time spent? Is it around getting the services up and running? Is it time around root cause analysis? Is it around getting the stuff back into operation? Where do you spend the time? And that gives us then, of course, a view on kind of where do we start to pinpoint and where do we start the event management implementation or the journey of it. And then, of course, talk to management, get to feel of the urgency. So once again, getting back to the KPIs and kind of the strategic part of the KPIs, what is the urgency of event management? Is there a kind of a burning flag or a burning ship that we need to fix? What are the priorities? And when we start to roadmap, what do we need to fix first? So it's all around kind of getting the basic information in place. Then I think it's time to look outside, talk to your trusted advisor, talk to your partners, talk to ServiceNow, and get a feel of what's the actual effort? How much does it take to implement this? What would be the license cost? What would be the training cost? Just getting a solid feel of the investment. That how do we get about it, and what's the monetary penalty basically? What do we need to put on the table? Scoping and road mapping is very important. So talk to your advisor, talk to your partner, talk to ServiceNow. There's a lot of stuff available on how other organizations have done this journey, where they started, what were the pain points. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from other people already adapting event management. And then kind of approaching implementation project time is, of course, choose the KPIs. Choose the KPIs to focus on. And that basically gives us the plan to success. So what are the actual metrics, whether they're on a strategic level or more of an operational level, what are we there to improve? So that should give a good baseline of kind of what do we need to spend, where are we spending it, and what are we actually improving it? And kind of once you have all of these bullets in your head, it's then time to start the work.
Yeah, this is a really awesome summary on this. I think putting it in a journey like this makes total sense from a business perspective. So you guys obviously have been working with a case like this. So maybe we could spend here 3-4 minutes just high level to speak. What are some of the main benefits that you saw, Hannes, at the Cloud People with implementing this?
Sure. Yeah, I took one example from our event management customers. And it's one of those really nice examples, of course, that where we get a huge cost avoidance or cost reduction. So this customer in the telecommunications area was looking at a lot of legacy tools, a lot of event management tools that had kind of duplicate capabilities, and there were a lot of these tools basically on top of each other. And with the new functionality of ITOM Health from ServiceNow, and especially with the agent-based stuff in ITOM Health, there was a lot of capability that we could just rip and replace. So that kind of incurred a lot of dramatic cost reduction when it came to licensing cost. That's not always the case, but in this case, I think we were lucky together with the customer that we were actually getting an immediate return on investment on reducing license costs. But in this case, as well as in all of the other cases, I think the mind change or the change in operations or modus operandi is more important. So we are moving from basically looking at individual CIs or individual servers sending in alerts or sending in events, to more of a service-based approach. And if you look at the very bottom of the slide, so that should give you a little bit of picture of the scope of it. So there are around 6,000 devices generating 1 million plus events at any 24-hour time period. And what we've managed to accomplish is that out of those 1 million events, the alerts are going to be in the hundreds only. So not thousands, but in the hundreds. And then that leads on to different incidents at the pace that we haven't yet actually calculated. But it's a good testament that we are actually reducing the noise quite a lot and only creating hundreds of alerts. But I think, this case being very much focused on rapid implementation and a huge cost reduction, I think that's just phase one. The important part is the journey that we've started together and the journey that Alex's team and our teams are helping our customers in advising, in kind of planning for the journey. That's the more important part. But a good case, we can open it in more detail in one-to-one sessions. So not going into customer names, but it is a testament to why event management actually is a good investment in our view.
Yeah, and what I really thought was so cool with this case is that you guys instantly started using the new agent-based, so that it's very beneficial, of course.
Yeah, that was also actually a lucky shot that it came from ServiceNow at that point. So sometimes luck can be involved in these cases, but it's a good learning lesson. We can take it from that, and then we can apply it to different other customers as well. So it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's right. With that being said, there is always a lot of things to speak about when it comes to these sort of topics. We've been sitting here more than 1 hour now almost. I see there is a lot of really great questions coming in here, and what you mentioned, Hannes, before about one question which I like to highlight from the audience is around, is it a necessity to have that perfect CMDB? I would say it's not a necessity. There is a fallacy even of having that, always chasing of that perfect CMDB with event management. Don't let that become a showstopper. But yeah, like you said before, Hannes, using event management as an incentive to let's improve the CMDB is a great driver, but it's not a necessity as such.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is a good question, and luckily we had the slides to prove it. But yeah, it is going to come under the radar or under the magnifying glass. But yeah, as Alex said, it's not a necessity. So don't wait for that to start event management. You can go ahead with it. So a very good question. Thanks for that.
Yeah. A final question, which I saw is a more technical oriented one, but I'm happy to answer it. So Chandrish is asking, are there any scenarios where we can use event management as one of the sources to populate the CMDB? I find this a rather interesting question, actually. I would say you will get very little data from just using event management to populate the CMDB from it. In that case, I would rather seriously consider either integrating things or using the agent-based approach. Using event management as a source in itself for the CMDB, I would not think so. But nonetheless, everyone, with that being said, there are more questions, but we will get back to you individually, as we said. We have now sat here for 1 hour, and I'd like to thank everyone so much. I thought this was great fun. I don't know about you, Hannes and Ermina, but
really brilliant fun.
Absolutely. And for some next steps here, keep in the loop about Einar Partners and the cloud people. Follow us on LinkedIn. We will do more sorts of these masterclasses. As Nermina mentioned in the beginning, all of those of you attended, you will receive a white paper sent out about event management, so kind of a guidebook of how you can implement it yourself. And you can always reach out to either me or Hannes if you are curious about these aspects. So check out the website of the cloud people, check out the website of us. Yeah, let's be in touch for the future, everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.